I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Tonight we're starting out with a tour of a place we rarely get to see, the Oregon State Prison in Salem. We're going in at the invitation of Portland's former police chief and Multnomah County's former sheriff, Mike Reese. He's now the head of corrections throughout the state, and he wanted us to see this because he thinks it needs to be replaced. And that is our big story tonight. The Oregon State Penitentiary, sometimes called OSP, was built in Salem during a different era. In fact, it was actually literally built during a different century, with the first buildings going up way back in 1866. It sits on a total of 194 acres, although the prison itself takes up just 30 acres. And it's surrounded by 25-foot walls, which are patrolled by armed officers. And that's where our Evan Watson visited recently to see the conditions for himself and to ask the corrections director why he believes a change is needed.
On the 5th floor of a cell block at the Oregon State Penitentiary, a guard makes her rounds checking on inmates in their cells.
What's up, Sock?
It's warm, but not like it has been.
Earlier this summer, when it was over 100 degrees, walked up to the top floor. It's oppressive.
5 floors below, there's a line of wheelchairs and walkers outside the cells because the Echo Block doesn't have elevators or air conditioning. Corrections officials say neither would work in this part of the concrete prison, mostly built in the 1930s. Mike Reese, the former Multnomah County Sheriff, is less than a year into his job as the state's director of the Department of Corrections. When he started in November, he visited all 12 DOC institutions. OSP stood out.
I think this is the top priority for me in terms of looking at that replacement or remodel. I think it's time that we really have a good hard look at this institution and decide if it's the right place for us to house adults in custody. And is it also helping lead to better outcomes? Or is the institution itself a barrier to a progressive correctional facility?
The Oregon State Penitentiary in Salem is the state's only maximum security prison. It houses 1,800 inmates. About 460 staff members work there. Department of Corrections leaders now have a big ask for state lawmakers. Give them funding to build a brand new prison. DOC estimates it would cost $624 million to replace the state pen. The current facility already has a backlog of $110 million in deferred maintenance requests and tens of millions more for other needs. But first, the DOC wants a feasibility study, figuring out how much all of this would cost.
How much money do you continue putting into a facility, an aging facility?
Senator Janine Salmon co-chairs the Ways and Means Public Safety Subcommittee, a key role in recommending big capital investments. She knows a new state prison isn't exactly a political home run.
You recognize that in general this may be an unpopular proposition, but from what you've seen, it's needed.
It can't be something that we can continue to ignore because it will go away. It only gets more expensive.
Salmon said she couldn't rank a new state pen against other legislative priorities, like housing and homelessness. But the timing, she says, is right for a feasibility study. Director Reese, in a letter to all DOC staff members, wrote that the last big prison upgrade invited a great deal of scrutiny, and he expects OSP would be more expensive and cause similar conversations with taxpayers and representatives. But he argues that it's simple. OSP was built in a different time, and modern-day corrections have a different outlook.
It just feels like a place that is more punitive than restorative. And we want our correctional environment to be a place where people heal from the trauma that they've had, where they have systems of accountability in place that lead to better outcomes, the programming that helps people with their substance use disorders, job training programs, educational opportunities.
KGW saw some of those services, sitting in on religion and language classes, touring the legal library, counseling and job training areas. None of these spaces are accessible by elevator, which DOC says is another facility flaw. A different part of the prison is under construction for plumbing repairs. DOC lists ventilation, sanitation, and security as growing concerns. And outside, past the yard and the rec areas, there are special housing buildings for prisoners with behavioral and mental health needs. DOC says these spaces are not suited for current treatment standards, that modern facilities have space, lighting, and other advantages designed to stabilize and help inmates and reconnect them with the general population.
Why do you view this as being so pressing, so needed right now?
Well, again, we've got an aging population in custody. If we're going to meet the needs of that aging population, I think now is the time to address it, not wait till it becomes, just dire circumstances, or we're in litigation over ADA issues or something of that nature.
Data shows the average age of an OSP prisoner has increased steadily for about 20 years. It was 38 years old in 2001. Now it's 44 years old. Other states, Nebraska, Alabama, Georgia, and New Hampshire, are all in the process of building their own new state prisons. Reese has a proposal of his own here in Oregon: move the state prison to land that DOC already owns on the eastern edge of Salem, near other public safety buildings.
That would open up about 200 acres here in the city of Salem for maybe something remarkable here in terms of housing and mixed-use development.
Because you see a state pen model that could better serve everyone that's here.
Absolutely. Be a more humane place for us to house people. I don't envy the difficult decisions that our legislators have to make in these budget priorities. I will say we have a moral and a legal responsibility to care for the people in our custody, and we're going to do that in the most humane way that we can.
Evan joins me now. Super interesting story. It didn't occur to me there wouldn't be air conditioning in some parts. Is it the entire prison or just where you looked at?
Not the entire prison, just some of the cell blocks didn't have air conditioning. The infirmary, the services, those areas did, so it depended where you were.
Okay. And we talked about maybe $500 million to build a whole new facility, but what would it cost just to have this feasibility study?
That's not decided just yet. The DOC is going to put out their proposal for that here in the coming months to lawmakers, but in other states it's been hundreds of thousands, maybe a couple million, so definitely a lot less than that $624 million to build a prison, to at least study to see how much would a replacement or repairs cost.
Sure, that does seem much more likely
Sure,
this coming
start
session.
there.
Yeah. And then if it's approved, how long would it take to actually get it up and built?
Mike Reese estimates 5 years as the optimistic timeline. That would put this in 2030 to get something built and then moved over. Knowing how these things typically go, it would likely be longer than that once approval comes. So this is a long-term project, or at least proposal.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Evan. I had no idea it's as old as it is. Thanks for showing us that. All right, now let's dive into last night's presidential debate, the first between Vice President Harris and former President Trump. The two candidates sparred over all kinds of issues, from immigration to the economy. We'll touch on some of the bigger moments during the debate in just a second and get your comments. But the discussion over who won the debate or what it could mean for Election Day really depends on where you lean politically. And that brings us to something that we think is very interesting. Here's a map that comes from John Horvick with the excellent local group DHM Research, showing the sheer size of the Portland media market and the political makeup of registered voters. Our signal also extends into southwest Washington, but this is just a look at Oregon. From the northwest coast to the borders with Idaho and Nevada, everywhere you see dots on this map are areas where Portland TV signals go. And while the dots are interesting, here's what the numbers show as far as politics in the market. The highest percentage belongs to non-affiliated voters at 38%. Democrats are next at 35%, Republicans in third at 20%, or 1 in 5, followed by the Independent Party of Oregon at 5% and a few others. Horvick also included this fascinating graph with updated registration numbers from the Oregon Secretary of State's statewide voter registrations over time. In the 50s, we had a nearly 50-50 split between Democrats and Republicans. The rise of non-affiliated voters and independents, the orange line, began in the mid-70s, steadily increasing until they overtook Republicans in 2012 and Democrats in 2016. And now we have voter registration, which comes when someone registers, gets a license for the first time. And so that becomes an unaffiliated person if they don't check a box. All right, so now you know and you understand where the political lines appear to fall in Oregon. Let's get to some of your thoughts about last night's debate. And first, let me say this. We hoped for, but we did not get any pro-Trump comments from you viewers. Nobody wrote to us to say that they thought he came out on top last night. Out of fairness, we would have definitely included those comments in this segment, and I know that some of you out there support him. But alas, nothing arrived in our inbox. Nancy wrote to us, though, to say, I can't believe I could sit through the whole thing. Can anybody ever actually answer a question? OMG, I'm an independent that leans a bit toward the right. All I can say is that it is absolutely shameful that we have to pick between these two. No matter who wins, the next 4 years will be an S show. Unbelievable.
I found Trump to be his usual outrageous as usual, and could hardly stand to continue watching. I voted for him the first time, but could never vote for him again.
All right, and Kathy told us Harris clearly won the debate. Trump is so witless and dull. He just keeps throwing the same old boring stuff at the wall and hoping it'll stick. Harris was able to bait him so easily, it's almost sad. His skin is so thin, you can almost see his internal organs. Thanks for that, Kathy. And how about this from Kim? Both had the pivot down to a science. I wish that they would have answered the questions instead of answering what they wanted to. I guess I'll be voting for Vice President Harris, not because I like her answers, but because she's not President Trump. I've never liked him and cannot support him. I wish that we had better choices. Now, let's hone in on some of the big issues and the claims made during the debate. As a few of you noted in your emails to us, there was plenty of pivoting going on, including on the very first question to Vice President Harris. And just a reminder, we talk about pivots every once in a while here, but if you missed it, a pivot happens when someone's asked a question that they don't really like, and so they just pivot and quickly answer a question they would rather like. And Vice President was asked if the country is better off now, nearly 4 years after she and President Biden were elected. She simply pivoted, did not answer, and began talking about her plan. And we'll touch on two more parts of the debate before we move on tonight. First, the former president's claim that immigrants in an Ohio town are eating family pets.
They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Okay, one of the moderators fact-checked the former president, saying ABC News had talked with the town's city manager, who said there's no evidence that that's happening at all. And today, Ohio's Republican governor visited the town, telling reporters he trusts the mayor and other county officials who say there are no credible reports of immigrants eating pets.
Well, you know, I think we should take the word of the city manager and the mayor that they've found no credible evidence of that story of Haitians eating pets. I think it's important for us to really focus in Springfield, and this is what we have done, on what's important. Take a community where they now have an additional 15,000 people come in. That's very, very unusual. And it creates particular challenges. These are challenges that we can work on, and that's what we're doing.
And finally, the former president is still convinced that he won the 2020 election, despite the fact that we are less than 2 months away from the 2024 election.
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say that.
sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval.
Well, the former president is right when he says there's so much proof. But unfortunately for him, the proof debunks his insistence that the 2020 election was rigged. More than 60 state and federal courts and his own attorney general have determined 2020 was a fair and square election. And despite the animosity on stage last night in Philadelphia, Harris and Trump actually shook hands this morning ahead of the 9/11 memorial ceremony in New York. No word yet on if there will be another debate between Harris and Trump before the election, but their VP candidates will soon square off. Democrat Tim Walz and Republican J.D. Vance are scheduled to debate on October 1st. After the presidential debate last night, both candidates running to be the next governor of the great state of Washington squared off in Seattle. I know a decent number of you live in Washington, and those who don't still would be interested in what was said. Drew Andre from our sister station there brings us the highlights.
Well, both candidates listed public safety as one of their top priorities. They both highlighted that Washington has the fewest law enforcement officers per capita in the country. The debate over public safety got heated at times, and it included a big revelation from Dave Reichert.
Dave, I'm sorry. I'm going to take no lectures from you about public safety when you are voting for and supporting a convicted felon for president who, by the way, is also a convicted sexual abuser.
I hate to disappoint you, Bob, but I am not supporting Mr. Trump. I'm making that announcement tonight. I am also not supporting Mrs. Harris.
And on the topic of public safety, Ferguson said he would increase a grant program in his budget as governor to help local jurisdictions hire more police. Reichert highlighted his lengthy career in the King County Sheriff's Office and concerns about an increase in violent crime across the state during Ferguson's time as Attorney General. He said he would also prioritize hiring more law enforcement officers across multiple jurisdictions. During gun control conversations, Ferguson took credit for banning the sale of assault weapons.
My opponent opposes the ban on the sale of assault weapons. My opponent opposes the ban on the sale of high-capacity magazines. My opponent even opposes universal background checks, supported by more than 60% of Washingtonians.
I would look forward to implementing programs similar to Safe Cities, similar to Project Safe Neighborhoods, and bringing people together to address the issue of gun crime. Again, you have to hold people accountable and responsible, those people that are committing crimes with guns.
All right, that was going on last night in Seattle. The candidates also butted heads over abortion, climate change, and gave their plans when it comes to homelessness. You can find that coverage over on kgw.com. In the meantime, coming up next on The Story, we're revisiting deflection in Multnomah County, updated numbers through the first 10 days of recriminalization of hard drugs, and how the Portland Police Union feels about how the process is going when The Story returns. We are now a week and a half into Oregon's recriminalization of hard drugs and Multnomah County's system of deflection. That's the program designed to help people found with drugs avoid jail and get treatment. So far, the numbers are small. According to the county, as of Tuesday, there have been 21 dispatches for deflection and 15 people accepted into deflection. The 6 who were not deflected may not have simply rejected the option. The county tells us they could have been arrested after hours or had their charges dismissed in court, meaning they did not need deflection. It's been an interesting start to the program, especially since the deflection center is not ready and won't open until sometime next month at the earliest. We decided to check in to see what the Portland police think about this deflection program, since they are literally on the front lines of it. Aaron Schmautz is president of the Portland Police Union, and he said without that deflection center, a place where officers can take people found with drugs, little has changed.
The biggest issue for law enforcement at this point is just understanding our role. This whole mobile deflection thing doesn't provide, sea change. And that's the real issue, is that law enforcement, the biggest thing we get calls about is, hey, this person is in my doorstep. Hey, this person is, in public doing things they're not supposed to be doing. And so a big part of this deflection center was to be able to move people. So the mobile thing actually doesn't really answer the biggest question that we've had.
That mobile thing he's talking about is the county's process of sending outreach workers out to talk to people found with drugs on the street. They will offer that person a chance at deflection and, in theory, get them into shelter and treatment. In reality, it's often not working that way. First, the outreach teams are only available from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Friday. And even when the team is available, they sometimes cannot get the person into treatment right away. We saw that happen last week. In this case, as we watched, police waited 20 minutes for the outreach team. Then the team tried for 30 minutes to find a program the person could start right away because he was ready. But in the end, they could only give him some phone numbers to call. Then everybody just went on their way.
And this is where this conversation has been so frustrating for me is, we forget about the caller. The caller is the person, we are in a service industry, and certainly we're serving everyone. We're serving the people who call, we're serving the people who stand there and watch, we're serving the person who we're being called about. But it's like, if you're in a customer service industry and the person is calling and asking for help, and you see the police show up, a bunch of tax dollars, do some stuff, they leave, some other tax dollars are being spent on some deflection stuff, they show up, they leave. I think pretty quick you're looking at your pocketbook and wondering what you just paid for. And that, for many people, I think is very frustrating.
Now, because we try not to just dwell on problems on this show, we also want to showcase any solutions to the many issues in our community. So I asked Mr. Schmautz what he thinks needs to be done.
Well, so 100% we need to be focused on ramping up available treatment beds, and we need to be focusing on people who are ready for treatment. There should be zero vacancies for willing participants in treatment. I think that's a big piece of it. Another big piece of it is partnership. For a long time our system has focused on a balance between community-based organizations, nonprofits, and spending a lot of tax dollars on those, and law enforcement as some sort of vector, but there's no necessitated or required cooperation between the two. I would love to see legislation that directs our government to function well together. If we're spending tax dollars on nonprofits, there needs to be some kind of North Star that we're working towards. I think we need to have a focus on sobriety. I think we need to have real kind of deep dive conversations about what we're trying to accomplish. And maybe that sounds ethereal, but we don't, in the absence of a goal, your mission drifts. So law enforcement's role in all of this will always just be making our streets safe. We're not well situated to be a social service provider. We might be a social service assistant, but you hear every day people talk about people suffering from mental health issues and addiction issues. We need access through partnership, and that needs to be mandated to the people who are accepting the money.
And as far as the coordination with the government and the various pieces, I wonder if that's something that you saw when you went to Portugal.
Yeah, that was the one big takeaway, right? Is that their whole of government approach, it's all run through one government agency, and all things, it's called PsyCAD, everything flows through it. The police work in deep partnership. But I guess the biggest thing, even is, sort of an aside. You look at Portland Street Response. So many people who have active voices in our community don't want Portland Street Response to work with law enforcement at all. And this is a very good example of where, again, they're all city employees. We need to all be working towards the same goal. And when we have kind of weirdly adversarial relationships with different services, it fractures the system. In Portugal, they don't do that because they're all like, well, we're just trying to solve the same problems. And so here, I would just like to remind people, when you hear the hyperbolic conversations around what law enforcement does, we do it because we're asked to. And so help us be better by partnering with us.
And just a reminder, Portugal, the first nation in the world to decriminalize drugs. So Schmautz wants to take a look at how that's going. All right, so a long ways to go to make the drug deflection system work in Multnomah County. If you're frustrated, maybe it helps to know that the police are frustrated too. Keep it right here. We'll be back right after this. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, well, that never ends. It just goes on and on. The good stuff's coming your way next. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night, 6:30.